That afternoon, they paired us up and took us to the beach to share the gospel, which I had no idea how to do. We saw a lady on her beach towel by the water. We went running over there. So I opened up my little 4 spiritual laws booklet and I just read it out. I said, "Do you want to know how to go to heaven?" And she said, "Yes. I have been trying to learn that for years and no one can tell me. Can you tell me?" I said, "Well, I can read it." So I read it to her and she got on her knees on the beach in California in her bikini and just became a Christian. Right. First day being a believer, I was able to share. And let me tell you, you think that doesn't change your life?
Welcome to the Be Unbound podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Brush, along with our producer and co-host, David Rethemeyer. And David and I are sitting here grinning because we just finished a really fun conversation with one of our favorite people. It is a delight and a pleasure for us to introduce to you one of our board members, Cindy Cohn, and honestly, one of the primary reasons that we actually exist as a company. And Cindy shares a couple stories about her kind of connection to Unbound and then a bit of her faith journey. And I don't know, David, it's just impossible for me to be around Cindy without feeling better about myself, life, the universe in general, and just smiling uncontrollably because she's just that kind of person.
Oh, and like right before we hit the record button with Cindy, she just came on and she was just like, "Oh, I just hope that, if I can say anything encouraging to your audience and just deliver that to you guys." Like, she is somebody who just oozes encouragement. And yeah, I completely agree. There is no way that I think any of our listeners can listen in on this conversation with Cindy and not leave having smiled a lot. So it is a really enjoyable conversation.
Well, there's some irony too. We ended the conversation and then David and I got an extra 10 minutes of direct coaching and counseling that I was like, oh, we should have left the recording run that, added tons of value to my life. And just, I felt like I was taking notes on the conversation after the conversation just as much, which is a typical response to any time with Cindy. So we're delighted to share this conversation with you. Maybe more delighted to introduce you to Cindy. This is an extraordinary and ordinary podcast, but I don't know. I said this when we had our last guest on, but I'm not sure there's any part of Cindy that cannot be described as extraordinary. She has really had an extraordinary impact on the people around her. I think an extraordinary impact for the kingdom and just personally an extraordinary impact on my life and on the lives of our students and those that we serve through Unbound. And it is a delight, pleasure, and honor to introduce you to her with this conversation we're about to share with you. Well, Cindy Cohn, welcome to the Be Unbound podcast. It is an honor and delight to have you here. We'll talk a little bit about this in the intro, but I'll just back it up and say here that honestly, we would not be here if it wasn't for Cindy Cohn. And that can be true on about 6 or 7 different levels. And also, interviewing Cindy is about as close as I can get to interviewing a member of my family and have it not actually be a member of my family, just in terms of the impact that she has had on my life and the lives of our students. And just how much we respect and treasure her. And so, Cindy, it is just really a delight in every aspect of that word to have you here. So welcome to the podcast. We're glad you're here.
Well, I'm overwhelmed. That's so kind of you. And I just want to say, I feel the same being on here. I'm very honored to be on here. Love each of you so much. And I'm just so grateful that God's put Unbound together and where it is right now. So I'm just very happy to be here. If I can share anything that's going to be encouraging to someone else, I want to do it. I hope I can. So we should pray for that.
We can definitely, I feel confident in that, I believe, in terms of your ability to do that. We were just recently all together at Base Camp, which was our latest Unbound event down in the Gulf Shores in Alabama. And Cindy had an excellent presentation to our students there and received the first standing ovation of our event. And when I say standing ovation, I mean Cindy said her last word and the entire room of students flew out of their seats. And just as a testimony to the kind of value that Cindy can bring and the kind of heart that they could see instinctively and hear in her voice. And it was fun to see that, but it was great to listen. And there were aspects of that presentation, Cindy, that I still think about every day. When we say Cindy is kind of integral to Unbound, there really is almost not a day that goes by that I don't think about something Cindy or her husband Rush has said or done that has had an impact on the way we treat and work with students. So before we get into all that, Cindy, just give us a little bit of background and tell us how in the world you ended up here. And give us a little bit of your life story as much as you'd like to do in the time you have here.
Well, I was born in, yeah, okay. Well, That is an interesting story. If you're talking about Unbound specifically,
Yeah.
it goes all the way back to one day. It was time for us to send our daughter to college. And we both were like, we don't want to do that. We wanted her to have the education.
Mhm.
'Cause I'm big on education and big on being an excellent, helping our children to become, and us too, excellent ambassadors for Christ. And that includes, in my mind, being as prepared as you can, as excellent as you can in every area of your life. And that sounds sort of legalistic. I don't mean it that way. I mean, God says to become like Christ. So there you have it. It's kind of like we should, right? We should try at least. And so we were trying to figure out, how do we really continue her homeschool education in a way that's really excellent and will help her to be whatever it is God calls her to be in the best way possible. So we thought of all kinds of different Christian colleges. We thought of private colleges. We thought of everything. And I just went to prayer. I was just praying and praying. And I'll just tell you a kind of funny story, because Rush likes to tell this story, and it's just a true one. We were both sound asleep, middle of the night, and I just woke up and I'm all nervous. What are we going to do with Stephanie? Where is she going to go? What's going to happen? And praying. And I started praying quietly in my heart, because Rush was sleeping. And I heard this man's voice say, well, just start a college. And I started laughing. I was like, oh, that's hilarious. That's so silly. Why did you say that? And Rush sat up in bed. He said, who are you talking to? And I said, well, why did you say to start a college? There's no way we could do that. He said, I didn't say that. And I was like, oh, well, guess what? Maybe we should consider this idea.
I have news for you.
We decided that the best way to determine if it was God's will or our fear was to go to God's word and to wise counselors. So that's what we did. And pray. We spent a year, and we went to everyone, not just someone you would think you might go to, like a godly person that already is homeschooling their children, they're your pastor, someone like that. That we did. We even went to our in-laws, who were not necessarily in favor of us at first homeschooling, until they saw the product. And then they said, please, whatever you're doing, keep doing it, because they're amazing. And they had a lot of amazing things to say. So we went to everybody, and finally we determined, yes, there's a real need for this. We're going to do it. How we're going to do it, it's going to be a little unique. So I began to make some plans, because I am an educator, and I have my master's in education. My doctorate's in something else, but my master's is in education. And so I started writing curriculum and writing a plan and reaching out to all my friends and having small meetings. And before we knew it, I had determined, and Rush agreed with me, he's so kind, that I didn't want to have an online college. I wanted it to be an in-person, interactive college. It could be on the computer, but it needed to be some interaction. Students need to be able to express themselves and to get a response from someone wiser than them, and that's what they're doing here, supposedly in college. And they are doing it in Unbound. Thank you, God. So a good friend of ours, Brad Bowler, called us and said, hey, I've got this idea for doing something. Can I come over? I said, come on. So he came over, and I said, I've got an idea too. So I showed him my paper and all it was. And what I told him about it was, the name of this college is going to be called College in a Box. And he said, no. I said, yes. And do you think, is that stupid? He said, no, look at this. He showed me his paper, and his was a lot of the same stuff, College in a Box. And I said, oh my goodness. We talked about our vision, and we found out his vision was more business-like. It was going to be more computer, online, College in a Box. And so I said, okay, you go do your thing. I'm going to do my thing. Let's just support each other. So we did that. And during that time, I said, I think, Brad, you and Rush need to talk, and he needs to be on. You need to develop a board and let him be on your board, because he's got ideas, and you're young and you're smart. You've got great ideas. But if this is going to really go somewhere and help people, you need him. And then he'll get him off my back. That'll be really great. So he did. He started a board right here in our living room, right here where I'm sitting, in fact. And we invited a few different people, and they came over. We had barbecue, and we told them Brad's vision and my vision and how they're going to be slightly different, but we might sort of help each other. And that is how it started. And the rest of that is history, right? All the rest of it. So that's how it started.
Yeah, and for our listeners, that led to an organization called College Plus. And in an earlier episode that we did, we interviewed James Glenn. At the end of that, David and I were talking, and I said, James was one of those who we stand on the shoulders of, that he was one of the people that put in blood, sweat, and tears to get Unbound to where it is today, even though he's off doing something different now. And we would be able to say the same of a bunch of folks, including Brad, who is the original founder of College Plus, which eventually became Unbound, that original board that met with Cindy and Rush in their living room. And honestly, there's absolutely no way that we would be here doing anything that we're doing without their really hard work over a long time that did lots of things to transform higher education, a lot of things that we take for granted. Those folks were the pioneers for it. And then we got an extra bonus in that Rush and Cindy continued on and sat on the board of Unbound. And they make it possible for us to be there. And they do some of the same things I'm sure they did for Brad, which is pray for us unceasingly and also encourage us, which we appreciate. And then I know they're really good, especially Rush, at coming in and saying, that is a really dumb idea. What are you thinking? and there are so many cliffs we have not sailed over because of Rush and Cindy saying, hold on a second. Have we thought of this carefully? And generally the answer is no, we have not, but we are now. And
We
now
had
we're in good shape.
spoke with those clips ourselves, so we knew.
So they've been able to draw over the roadmap. Well,
Yeah.
Cindy, so you went, you are actually Dr. Cone, so you hold a master's and a PhD. You started a college, which then in some ways merged in some different pieces to become what is Unbound today. You are a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and then you're really far into, I don't know if it's a second, third, or fourth career, but a different career now. So tell us a little bit about what you do now, in addition to keep us from selling off of cliffs.
Okay, well, what do I do now? My favorite thing that I do is really and truly my grandchildren. That's my very favorite thing. If I could box that in a box and sell that whole thing, I would do that because I just want everybody to know just they're precious, and everybody's grandchildren are precious, and everybody's children are precious. When you're having your children, you're staying up all night with them, like you're talking about earlier, and like ours are doing. And when you're our age, you get to be the one that they come to and hug your neck so long that they don't want to let go because they think you're the perfect person. And of course, you're not, but they love you and you love them right back. So, we love because God first loved us. And when we love those grandchildren like we do, they love us right back. And it's precious. So there's that. But if you're talking about an income producing kind of thing, then we've gone into real estate. And what I mean by that is not getting our license and being a broker or even an agent. But Rush and I grew up from a family that loved the land, loved real estate. My family grew up on ranches down in South Texas. And so they thought cows were pretty. And I remember being a little girl and my mom saying, look at that beautiful cow. And I'd go, oh, she's so fat. Why do you think she's pretty? I didn't get it at all. But by osmosis, living with mom and my dad, who also grew up in a farm in Oklahoma. So they both had appreciation for the land and the value of the land and what actually happens when you can own a piece of property and how that can really affect the way you live out your life. So Rush and I kind of had that in the back of our minds, had no interest in it, no knowledge about it. But when we got our first home, I remember thinking, wow, that house across the street, if we owned that one too, and then what about that one? If we owned that one also, we could rent those and then we would make, it just kind of came naturally to me. So we did that. We got to where we'd see a house and somebody would want to sell it. And we'd say, okay, we'll buy it if we can afford it. We tried to work something out and we would try to buy it. And we did that a few times. And then we ended up going off to Saudi Arabia for Rush to work for an oil company. And during that time, we started getting offers on our house. And we're like, we paid $27,000 for that house. Why are they offering me $99,000? I don't even get that. What's happening in Dallas? Come to find out, something was happening in Dallas. And our house was in just the right place. And by the time we got back, it was just like, oh, wow, you mean you're going to pay me $125,000 for it? Well, I don't know if I should sell it now. I'm thinking maybe it's worth too much to sell it. But then I remembered my dad was in the oil business, not the oil business that owns the oil, but the worker bee oil business. Okay. And I remember him telling me the story about the guy the cowboy out in West Texas. Y'all probably heard of Spindletop, the biggest, maybe you haven't, but it was the biggest oil find back in the, I don't know, y'all, 40s, or I don't even know, 30s, I'm not sure when. But the man died, and this oil was under his ground. He died penniless. And the lesson behind that is you never know what you have, what you're sitting on, until you can find it. And so how do you find it? Sometimes you're not meant to find it. The next person's meant to find it. So all that goes to say that, what was I telling you? I forgot.
You were talking about how you got into real estate.
Oh,
Sorry.
yes. Yes, thank you. So so I remember thinking, this is possibly the thing that has the oil. Maybe this house is really valuable now, but won't be down the road. Maybe I need to sell it to somebody else who's gonna really reap the rewards. I don't know. But we sold it. And then we bought a little house down the street, and then someone came knocking on my door. Rush was out doing something away out of the town, and they said, "Can we buy your house?" Well, how much? And he told me, and it was twice what we just paid 6 months before. So I called up Rush. Back then it was this way. It was a real phone, not a cell. Honey, can I sell the house? He goes, what? I said, is it okay? They're going to offer us, I think it was 200,000 and we bought it for 100 or 99. He said, yes, sell it right now. I said, okay. I didn't have someone in the yard. I didn't do anything. And that's how we started. And that was many, many years ago. So every chance we had to learn about properties near us, we did that. And we kind of began to learn them like the back of our hands. Like we'd be in one house. I would know that one block over, those houses are not the best values. But one block this way, they're really good values. And if you've been in one spot for a long time, you know what I'm talking about, especially in a neighborhood, in a city. So, yeah, so we kind of got that way and we helped different people learn how to do it and they were excited about it. So fast forward, we do our lives. We don't really do real estate. We just sell one here and sell one there and make a little here and make a little there. And we think it's kind of cool. That's all we really knew about it. And then one day, about 5 years ago, Rush said, honey, he'd retired, not good for Rush to retire. Retirement is not in the Bible. You just keep on going until you bless your children, pull the skirts up like Jacob did, and say goodbye and go to be with your fathers. I mean, that's my perfect way of dying, I think. But he said, I just really I want to buy a franchise. I said, you do? What kind of franchise? And he said, a restaurant. And I'm thinking, my sister had been in the restaurant business and I knew restaurants are you can make good money out of them, but they're very fickle, right? And also you work hardest when everybody else wants to rest and play and have their holidays. So the holidays and all those times when you should be with your family. So we talked about it and he ended up finding a real estate franchise. And I said, well, what do they do? And he said, they wholesale, but these guys are awesome. They're Christians. I'm like, huh. So we got to talk to them. So we bought a franchise from them, their very first one. And lo and behold, we learned a lot from them, but also learned that the things that they promised weren't what they delivered. So, you always under promise and over deliver. You know that old cliche. They didn't do it that way. And we were really sad for them. So I kind of spoke up and called one of them up, the head of all of it. And I said, hey, this is just not good business. But it's worse than that. I'm sorry to tell you, because I care about you a lot, that this is not living your life as a strong male believer example for all the people in your company. So he said, I think you're right. What do we do? And I told him what I thought he should do and that I'm going to sell my franchise. And he said, well, you're not really allowed to, but in your case, I'm going to let you. So he let us sell it. We ended up making more than what we bought it for. And we were out of it and we learned a lot. And we had a good friend because of the way we exited. So it worked out fine. But from that, I met a lot of young men, especially young women and young men, and some older men and women who had retired or were about that age, about our age, or a little younger, who had not been given the same kind of blessings that we had as we were growing up. They had not been given the same kind of parenting or family values, or in some cases, all of the cases, almost all of them, financial backing and all our support from their family. And they just kind of, sometimes people just click and we clicked with all these precious people. And I was like, okay, guys, we're going to just have a weekly meeting and I don't know much more than you know, but if you want to learn from me, you just listen to what I'm doing and then you can do it. And if it works, then you make money and I make money and we're all happy. So we did that. And a couple of them were really starting to we started making some money and they started making some money and I was having a ball. And then one day, this is the final conclusion to my real estate events. I saw these young men just literally, they would just cry and they would be just so grateful they could pay their bills that month and feed their children that month. And they could pay their car bill and they were so excited about it that I said, okay, we're going to do something even more than this. So, but I don't know what. So I just prayed about it. And one day I got a call from my pastor's wife. She's a good friend of ours. They had retired at 70 something and moved to Alabama. I think they're almost 80 to Alabama, where they were from. And they had 25 acres in Fredericksburg on this area called the Texas Wine Trail, which had become the Texas Wine Trail after they bought, had that property. And she said, Cindy, would you buy our property? I said, yes. And I never asked how much. I didn't ask why. I didn't ask anything. And let me tell you why. Because this is a couple that you should have them on your show. They would be on your podcast. They're amazing. They are truly humble servants of the Lord. They live out my 3 favorite words. If you're going to live your life, do anything, you got to love God, trust him, and obey him. Those favorite words. If you do that, you can get through pretty well. They did that in such a precious, precious servant way. I knew they didn't have well, let's just put it this way. They didn't have much money to retire on, okay? Because what pastors do, they're making very little, if any. They're giving it away to people who need it. And I knew they were doing that. So I had long and hard prayed and wanted to be able to give them a retirement, but I didn't have the money to give them a retirement for their whole retirement. We're trying to do our retirement, so I just said yes. And it just, all these little ideas went through my mind immediately when I was saying yes. And it was, I can't afford it. Whatever it's going to be, 25 acres over there, that's going to be a lot of money. But the bank can afford it. If I can talk the bank into giving me the money, then I can take it and I can fix it up and then I can resell it and I can make money. And it was just like boom, 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 instantly. And so my sweet little pastor's wife calls up her husband, honey, she's going to buy it. And at the closing, they told us it was more than we could afford, for sure. It was more than the bank wanted to give us. But we worked it out in a creative way. It's a long story. Anybody that wants to learn, we can talk about that privately. But we worked it out. And then at the closing, she said, Cindy, do you know that day I called you and asked if you'd buy the property? I said, yeah. And she said, well, that morning, her husband, Bob, and she had been talking. And she said, and we were like, well, we've just lived a great life. And this is wonderful. And what are we, we'll be able to be okay. And then we need to sell that property in Fredericksburg. And she said, so we prayed and God said, call Cindy. He didn't say Cindy's going to buy it. He just said, call Cindy. So they called me and I said, yes. And that's how he did it. So the bank gave them their retirement, all this lots and lots of money. And let me tell you, the cool story behind that, the day that they got that money, what do you think they did? Gave a lot of it away.
Yeah.
Family, who each one was in, one's a pastor. That family was eating peanut butter that week. Their children couldn't afford to have their braces put on. And then another, just each one had needs, and they just took care of all those needs, medical needs, all sorts of needs, called up doctors and paid for all the orthodontists for the next 5 years or whatever. And then they still had all this money to retire on. And then I got all my little guys that I'd been teaching. I said, hey guys, you're going to have to help me get this place in order. It's going to have to be beautiful so we can put it on Airbnb. We did it. It looks fabulous. And the neighbors began to notice, and these neighbors can afford it. And then Rush got the diagnosis of his heart issue, and he told me we need to sell that property. And I was very sad. But when God tells your husband, this is for all the ladies listening that are married or getting married, when God tells your husband, this is something that really needs to be done, you never say no, but you do say pray. And so we did. And God agreed with both of us. It's time to sell it. It was too much stress for him. So I just called up all the little neighbors and said, hey, I'm going to put my property on the market. And they're like, no, don't do that. Save the MLS fees. We'll come buy it. And we got all these offers. We got a great offer from a very godly family who we just love. And they're running it right now with some of my guys helping them take care of it. They're who are getting salaries from it. So that's what I do now. You just have fun with real estate and play with grandbabies.
Well, that's a great story. And I appreciate there was actually some threads there that I knew pieces of, but I didn't know the conclusion of. So that was fun to hear some of those stories told. And for those of you listening, that is a story that I didn't know, but I know the other side of that story, which is what Cindy just related there is basically the way she deals with us at Unbound, which is, I'm going to connect you to this person, connect you to this person. I'm going to pray for you here and help you here. And we're going to make this happen. And, you should pray about this. And then all of a sudden we were at a dead end, and then we weren't at a dead end. And often it's because doors open that, in fact, we have a saying around here. We documented when we relaunched Unbound in 2020 with the new organization that we're under now. There were 26 times where we were dead stopped, that there was no place to go forward, that there was no opportunity, and we were just stopped. And 26 times, I think miraculously, God opened doors for us.
Really.
Now, that is not to say that we didn't work and there weren't other people who worked really, really hard and who sacrificed, and all those things are true. But there was just, didn't matter how hard we worked or how much we sacrificed, there was no place to go forward 26 times. And 26 times we prayed, and 26 times God opened doors of miraculous, some of which were Rush and Cindy. And they were some of the early ones, those 26. And I tell you, when you go through a situation like that, you start to see things very differently. And here I was, probably statistically midway through my life. And all of a sudden, things that I had talked about all my life, I knew about, I understood. And I would say I definitely believed in, I understood. And there's
Yes.
sometimes a difference between believing in something and understanding something, but I actually saw it play out in a way that I really understood it. And yeah, I've seen that work out multiple times. And Cindy, I know that's kind of a big part of your story. When you were at base camp, you stood up and you said, "I've been praying for you," and you told our students. And I don't know that they completely understood, but there are some of us in the audience on staff who knew that Cindy had actually requested a list of all of our enrolled students, and she literally prays for them by name. And so when she said she was praying for the students, she didn't mean she was collectively praying, for all the students in Unbound. She meant that she was praying one-on-one for each of those. And so, Cindy, that's a long part of your story. This isn't like some recent, thing that you got into. It's much like real estate. You've been doing real estate for a long time, but you've been doing that kind of intentional prayer and intentional spiritual discipline for a long time. So tell us about that a little bit and tell us how that got started and where that came from.
Oh, I'm kind of, that's a long story you're asking for.
Oh, you tell good stories, so we're in good shape.
It goes back really and truly back to watching my mother be a prayer warrior. And she was. And so that was the start of it. But the biggest step was, I think, when I met the Lord, really met him. And like you just said, it's one thing to know that God's going to provide. He's your provider. He's going to come in at the last minute sometimes, and he's going to take care of you. But it's another thing to experience it 26 times when it's not just you, but it involves a lot of these other people that you know and love, right? So a friend of mine called me up in college and said, "Cindy, I don't think you know the Lord." And I was like, "Why do you say that?" I mean, I wasn't like a partier or any of that kind of stuff, so I didn't know what. She said, "Well, I just think you don't. So I think you should spend $100 and come with me," or 99, I think it was, "on this trip out to Arrowhead Springs, California, to the Campus Crusade for Christ camp. There's going to be a whole bunch of cute guys on the bus. We're going to all go together. It's going to be really great." And I'm like, "Well, that sounds great, but I don't have $100 or 99 what it was." But I was working at a place called Steak and Ale where I was a receptionist. It was a really nice restaurant in Dallas, the only place my dad would allow me to work. And I was not receptionist, the person that seats you, the seating hostess. Yeah. And so a very famous actor, Chill Wills, who used to be in movies with John Wayne all the time, very famous character actor, came walking in, and I recognized him right away. And we had a long wait, like 45 minutes for his group. It was a big table. He was going to have about, I don't know, 8 or 10 people there with him. And so I said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Wills, but it's going to be 45 minutes. Oh, he says, "You can get me in sooner, can't you?" And I'm like, "No, I can't do that. I can't get you in just because you're Chill Wills, but you can wait over here." And it was a bar. We had a room they could go into and wait at a bar, have something to eat and that kind of stuff. And so he went in, and about 15 minutes later, this large group left, and I had the guys clear the table and called him in. And so he says, "Thank you." Well, by then, he just assumed I'd gotten him in, but I didn't know that. So that night, my boss gave me my money, and I had to have the money the next day to go to that trip. And I'd already told her, "I don't have the money, I can't go." And so she said to me, "Well, God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, and he can provide it if he wants to." And I'm like, "What?" I didn't even know what that meant. I didn't get that at all. Of course he owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Anyway, I didn't get that, but she did. She's a really wonderful young lady of faith. And so the manager came and gave me my check, and it was like, I don't know, $60. And I was like, "Well, that's not going to be enough. So obviously I'm still not going." He said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you. You know that actor, Chill Wills, that came in? He wanted me to give you this. It's $25 for getting him in early, and you should not have done that." I said, "I didn't do it. I didn't get him in early. He just got in." He said, "Well, you can have the 25 anyway." So he said, "Oh, I forgot to give you this check from last week." All three things added up to $99.98 or something like that. And I was like, I wonder if this is from God. So I called up my friend Diane. "Do you think?" She said, "Yes, you're going. Give me the money. You're going to get on the bus." So She said, plus it's going to be so much fun. So we did. Got on the bus, met all these darling guys and girls, and had a great time. But when we got on the bus, that's a long bus ride from Dallas to California. It was long. And we didn't stop overnight. We just kept going. But when you're that age, you don't care. You're having fun. It doesn't matter. And we arrived, and I remember Bill Bright, who was the founder of Campus Crusade for Christ, walked right up to our bus, and he said, hey, anybody want to learn how to be saved and go to heaven with Jesus? And I said, I do. But before I went, my mother, who was Catholic, said, now, honey, you watch out for those Protestants. You know why they're called Protestants. They protested against the church. And I was like, I'll watch out. Don't worry. I'll be good. But I wanted to know that answer. You heard my story. All I really wanted to know was, how to get to heaven, have my whole family go there. So that was from the base camp. You heard that story. And so he said, okay. And so he just told us the 4 spiritual laws, this is how it happens. And I was like, are you kidding me? You mean you can get to heaven just by having faith in Christ? Well, that's easy peasy, but I couldn't believe it. And my mother had warned me. So I didn't do that right then. But I went to bed that night thinking about it. And this was the real clincher. I am not a climb up the mountain at 5 a.m. kind of person in any way. I wouldn't go off by myself like that. I wouldn't go in the dark like that. It had to be God. But I woke up and I just wanted to get away from everybody and find out from God, is this real? And I climbed up the top of the mountain and I watched the sunrise and I just said, it was so simple. I didn't do anything fancy. I just said, God, if Bill Bright is right, that's what I want. And I'm not kidding you. Immediately, I did not see cute guys anymore when I came down the mountain because my heart was filled with the Holy Spirit immediately. I am not exaggerating. I went down and I saw young men that needed Jesus all around. They were all around the pool waiting to go into breakfast. And young women that needed Jesus. I could just see, wow. And I had a whole different outlook on life. And that afternoon, they paired us up and took us to the beach to share the gospel, which I had no idea how to do. And so they paired you up, a new believer with an old believer, if they could. And so I just assumed she would just do it. So we hopped off the bus. We saw a lady on her beach towel by the water. We went running over there. I said, okay, tell her how to do it. And she goes, no, I don't know. You tell her. I'm like, no. By then the girl looked at us and I'm going, so I open up my little booklet, 4 spiritual laws booklet, and I just read it out. I said, do you want to know how to go to heaven? And she said, yes, I have been trying to learn that for years and no one can tell me. Can you tell me? I said, well, I can read it. So I read it to her and she got on her knees on the beach in California in her bikini and said, and just became a Christian right there. My first day being a believer, I was able to share. And let me tell you, you think that doesn't change your life? My prayer life was changed from then on because I had prayed on the bus, God, just if we could just share it with one person that really needs it. I know I needed it, just one person. Well, that's all we got was one person, but it was awesome. So from there, I've had years and years of struggles and joys and scary things and very scary and dangerous things and incredibly wonderful and beautiful things, just the whole gamut that life can offer. And through all of it, I've learned one thing. You bathe every decision with prayer.
Well, I can certainly testify to seeing that lived out. Rush and Cindy are frequently at our events, so they are typically in attendance. But a few years ago, we had one, and they weren't able to make it for a variety of reasons. And we had a situation that required immediate prayer. And a staff texted me and sort of outlined the situation. And I stepped around the corner out of a session, and I immediately texted our entire board, and that includes Cindy. And I said, I need prayers right now for this situation. And actually the whole board responded really quickly, but Cindy responded the fastest. And within within seconds of me sending that out, she said, I'm praying right now. And Cindy's text came in and said, I'm praying right now. And within seconds of that, a text came back from her staff member saying, I don't know what just happened, but we had a miraculous change in the circumstance.
God.
And I was, this is about the only time I've ever been able to tell that story without getting choked up emotionally. It was a powerful testimony to the power of prayer. And then just for me, a reminder of the blessings of the kind of community that we have on both sides of our Unbound community, on the folks that help us and guide us and give us wisdom, and of the students who come and attend, and of the staff who try to deliver what we're trying to do. And much of that is a reflection of the character and witness of Rush and Cindy. So, Cindy, thank you so much for coming on and taking the time. Thank you for all you do for Unbound. I'll relay one last story, which is we were at base camp and I looked through the glass windows in the back out to the deck of the beach, and Cindy was sitting in a chair talking with 4 or 5 students around there. And Rush looked over at me and he said, "We've been here less than 48 hours, and Grandma Cindy has now been discipling 30% of your class. We'll probably be at 100 before we get on the bus 2 days from now." I said, "I think you probably will."
So
And that is a kind of a testimony to the way Cindy operates and one of the reasons that we're so blessed to know her. So, Cindy, thanks for taking the time to come on. Thank you so much for all that you do for so many people, and especially for us, since we just flat out appreciate it. And
there,
it was an honor to have you.
the thanks are really go back to you guys and what y'all are doing. You are in the trenches. We are praying, and you're in the trenches, and you are the tools in God's hands. So keep on keeping on. We're so proud of you and so happy to be part of this.
Well, thanks for being here. It's an honor to be a part of it. And thanks for being on the podcast.
Okay. God bless you.
Well, as I said in the introduction, Dave, we should have kept the mic or kept the recording running afterwards. We got an additional 10, 15 minutes of Cindy talking about prayer, which is a subject really near and dear to her and something that I've learned a lot from her about. And so it was a fun conversation.
Oh, definitely. And I think just the fact that she did that, she just stayed on for several minutes afterwards and talked to us about prayer. And specifically, she was sharing stories about how God brought different people into her life who she was good friends with and formed powerful relationships with her. And I think just if I had to sum up like the importance of really what Cindy was talking about through this podcast, it was prayer and relationships. And just that she said toward the end is just, she really wanted to deliver to our audience that we don't pray enough and that prayer is such an essential thing. And that is something that is very evident that Cindy believes in not only her thought, but also in her action. And she also just believes that it is a relationship with our Heavenly Father. And also it is something that we get to use to bless those that we do have relationships with. And just both of those things are so incredibly important and essential to our lives, our everyday lives as Christians, and our ability to thrive. And it's something that I really just hope that we put enough stress on in Unbound as we try to encourage students to be able to live and thrive well as well.
Yeah, Cindy's conversation about Unbound in some of the earlier times of the organization, it's just a reminder. We did this a little bit on the end of the conversation we had with James Glenn. And I was thinking then, and then listened to that recently as it aired, and I was thinking that we could probably go a little step further. First, the way that Unbound kind of relaunched in 2020 on our knees in prayer. And I tell people, one thing God made really clear, there's never been a temptation for any of us, and especially for me, to ever think, oh, I brought about Unbound or I made Unbound, or profoundly the opposite. Every aspect of Unbound that has worked after we came to a complete dead end. And then the way was opened for us miraculously in such a way that we would never be tempted to think that our own resources, our own skills, our own talents, our own force of personality had anything to do with it. We got to work for it, and we certainly worked hard, but that wasn't, it was all initiated by God. And then the second thing is one that we've felt very keenly, and I think about a lot, and want to kind of make sure that we don't ever miss a chance to talk about. But we did not, and we mentioned this in the interview with James Glenn, we did not start Unbound. We're not the founders of it. We inherited a company that was started in 2003, and you heard Cindy talk about the story of that in the conversation with Brad in her dining room. The original organization was started by Brad Bowler, Ryan Yamani, and Woody Robertson. And those 3 people spent years and years reinventing higher education and pouring into the lives of over 10,000 students and pouring into the lives of people that work for them. And I was one of them. And their offer of a job changed my life, took me from being the director of admissions for a private selective liberal arts college to working for this little kind of educational startup that was based in Texas. I was still living in Virginia, opened up all kinds of doors and opportunities for me, introduced me to people that ended up playing enormous roles in my life, including Russian Cindy Cohn, and built the foundation that then was transferred to us in 2020 with the kind of relaunch with Unbound into what it would become today. And I do not go through a day without thinking about and reflecting on the sacrifice, the work, and the heritage that was set up that allows us to do what we do. So if any of you know those people, hear us clearly when we acknowledge them. If you are any of those people, just hear clearly that we say that we think of you every single day, and try not to miss an opportunity to tell you about it. And if you don't know any of those folks, just make sure that you understand and listen. Whatever you hear, whatever you like about Unbound has come through answered prayers, God's blessings, and miraculous intervention, and the hard work and sacrifice of a lot of folks before us. And we have been blessed to be stewards of what we've inherited, but we have inherited. And that's not a bad thing to remember to say publicly when we get a chance to do it. And Cindy gave us a chance. So as we conclude this, I think that today, David, we just talked a little bit about the history, so I don't think we want to go too much on to anything else, but just to say that we've had a really fun recruiting year so far. We are really watching all of our programs grow in some really miraculous and fantastic ways. And so if you're interested in becoming a part of this story of Unbound, know that we serve students from high school through college age, and I would be delighted to explain more to you if you'd like to call us, schedule an appointment, or just learn more about us by going to beunbound.us on the web. Until then, until we talk to you again, be unbound.